I sat there in a stunned silence watching the woman I'd shared 5 years of my life with. A woman I believed I truly knew, now transformed into a stranger. Once she was my partner, my confidant, the foundation of our shared dreams. Today, though, she stood with her arms folded and her gaze fixed at the floor, her face an empty mask that concealed the truth. In that moment, the title of wife no longer belonged to her. She had become someone else entirely, a stranger wearing a familiar face, her single sentence shattering everything we had built. I cheated because I needed a real man. For a fleeting second, a bitter humor bubbled inside me. Not out of joy, but from the sheer absurdity of it all. Real man? Physically? Emotionally? Financially? In what specific way had I fallen short of some undefined standard? And why did she speak as if it were an undeniable fact, a truth I should have embraced long ago? Her words hung in the heavy air between us, oppressive and unyielding. I waited desperately for her to retract them, to show even the smallest sign of remorse, a tear, a faltering inflection, any evidence that this confession hurt her as much as it pained me. But she remained mute, her posture resigned, almost as if she were testing to see whether my silence would eventually break into outrage, pleas, or a collapse into despair that might somehow justify her betrayal. It was as if my suffering was meant to validate her choices, to confirm her misguided definitions of strength. Then unexpectedly, a voice shattered the stillness. "Well, can you blame her?" I slowly turned my head, my mind reeling as I struggled to process what I just heard. Could it be that I'd misheard her? But no. There was her mother, standing firm with crossed arms, and a look of steely indifference that mirrored the cold detachment I had seen in her daughters. It was as though they had rehearsed this moment, patiently waiting for it to unfold. "You've always been passive," her father added with a shake of his head. "She needed more than that. A real man would have seen the signs." My chest constricted, my hands curling into tight fists, but the words refused to come. It was as if my brain were malfunctioning, fighting to grasp the surreal scene unfolding before me. Meanwhile, her sister lounged on the couch, her reaction as indifferent as if she'd anticipated this outcome all along. In that moment, clarity struck me. Not heartbreak or grief, but a sharp, undeniable realization. They weren't defending her. They were blaming me. I glanced back at her, or rather, at the image of the woman I'd once loved, the one I'd surrendered years for. She still offered me no words. Instead, she allowed her family to speak for her, exactly as they always had. It was almost laughable, the way things had fallen into predictable patterns. For years I had poured everything, late nights of tireless work, sacrifices beyond measure, into building a secure life for us, a life where she'd never have to worry. And this was my reward, not only betrayal and deception, but a profound disregard for all that we shared. It was as if my failures had forced her into the arms of another, as though she had chosen this course all along because I was never enough. I exhaled slowly, trying to dispel the last vestiges of disbelief. There was no point in arguing. I could see clearly now that her family had unanimously decided my fate long ago. Perhaps I had never truly belonged to their world. The painful truth hit me like a freezing slap. This marriage had never been entirely mine. It had always been their family drama, with me in the role of provider, the expendable extra. I searched her face one last time, looking for a hint of regret, a flicker of the woman I once cherished. But there was nothing. No anger, no sorrow, only an icy clarity. And at that moment, an unexpected smile broke through. A genuine laugh bubbled up and escaped my lips before I could even think to control it. Her sister snapped, "Are you seriously laughing now?" Sitting up straight with disbelief dripping from her tone. Her mother leaned forward, her expression twisting into something resembling disgust. "This is exactly what we're talking about. You never take responsibility. It's no wonder she felt the need for someone else." I shook my head slowly, my laughter fading into a knowing smirk. I scanned each face in the room. One by one, they looked at me not simply with disapproval, but with the conviction that I was entirely to blame. "You're pathetic," her father muttered, his head shaking as though he were ashamed of me, as though I were nothing more than a disappointment. Your wife tells you she needed someone real, and you act like this." Her sister scoffed, her arms crossing as her lips curled into a twisted mix of amusement and contempt. "Honestly, just get out already. You clearly don't deserve her." For a moment, a question nagged at me. What had I done to earn this treatment? To deserve a wife who would betray everything we built? To warrant having her family mercilessly trample my dignity as I stood there, lost in a haze of shock? But no answers came. In their eyes, I had already lost, and they weren't about to let me forget it. My wife continued to stand silently, arms folded and biting her lip, letting them wage war on her behalf, as if that were her proper role. It was all so painfully predictable. I sighed, massaging my temple as exhaustion seeped deep into my soul. "So let me get this straight," I said with an eerie calm. "She cheats on me, lies to me, destroys everything we built. And what's my fault?" Her mother's eyes narrowed, her voice hardening. "You pushed her into this." Her father nodded, disappointment etched on his face. "A man who allows his wife to feel neglected isn't a man at all." Neglected? The word nearly made me laugh again. I'd devoted countless late-night hours, sacrificed sleep, and given every bit of myself so that our life would be comfortable. I was there when she cried over trivial spats with her sister. I was there when she fretted over things that didn't matter. I was there whenever she doubted herself and needed reassurance. I'd held her, supported her, been loyal and present, but none of that seemed to count. I waited silently, hoping she'd step in, to accept even the tiniest share of responsibility. Yet she remained still, her lip caught between her teeth, arms unyielding, offering nothing. That final silence sealed it for me. I had spent every ounce of my energy trying to be the man she claimed to need, only to realize that she had never truly wanted me. Not really. I'd been nothing more than a convenience, an option easily discarded. I reached into my pocket, retrieving my keys, twirling them between my fingers as the voices around me grew louder, overlapping, desperate, all trying to force me to believe I was the sole reason for all this disaster. But I couldn't hear them anymore. I had made my decision. I continued to twirl my keys, the soft clink of metal cutting through the noise as they raged on, determined to imprint on my mind that I was their failure. I took one last look at her, a woman who had long since lost her voice, standing there, arms crossed, her face unreadable. She waited, expecting an explosion, a plea, a desperate explanation, but I would not give her that. I smirked and, shaking my head, declared firmly, "You know what? I'm done." The words struck the room like a detonating bomb, and for the first time since this catastrophic conversation began, silence enveloped us. All eyes were fixed on me, each one silently processing my declaration. Then her mother scoffed. "Oh, please, you're just being dramatic." I raised an eyebrow and slipped my keys back into my palm. "Am I?" Her father released a sharp breath through his nose, shaking his head in disapproval. Her sister almost rolled her eyes as my wife, still unmoving, still waiting her turn, remained a silent bystander. I exhaled deeply and turned toward the door. If taking responsibility is what you all expect, then fine. I'll take responsibility for the one thing that truly matters. I reached for the doorknob. "Leave it," echoed in my ears. The first words my wife had uttered all night, not as a deflection or excuse, but as an expression of raw panic. I glanced back slightly but did not stop. "Are you really walking out that easily?" her father barked. "That's the kind of man who runs away." I let out a short, mirthless laugh. "You've been telling me all night that I'm not a real man, haven't you? So why should you care what I do now?" I pulled open the door, and that's when the real panic set in. Her voice sharpened, desperate almost. "You're just going to leave? Just like that?" I glanced over my shoulder and replied, "Yeah, just like that." Her sister scoffed, crossing her arms, incredulity in her tone. "You can't really be serious," she sneered, as if this whole moment were a cruel bluff. "You're going to throw everything away over one mistake?" I raised an eyebrow as her jaw tightened. I simply nodded. "Yes, one mistake. You needed a real man," I added coldly, meeting her eyes with a long, hard stare. Her gaze widened with a flash of fear, and without another word I stepped through the doorway into the night and slammed the door behind me. And in that instant, it felt as though I had reclaimed my freedom. No sooner had I reached my car than my phone began to vibrate wildly. First one call, then another, and then yet more. With each ring, the screen lit up as if it were a holiday light display. 50 missed calls later, I stared at the numbers climbing on my screen and couldn't help but chuckle softly. Now they cared, I thought. I pressed the ignition and the engine roared to life. My phone, abandoned on the seat, continued its relentless buzzing. Calls coming in from her mother, her sister, even her father, all demanding something from me as though I were a service desk answering their every query. I didn't answer. I didn't hesitate. As I pulled out of the driveway, I rolled down the window ever so slightly, allowing the cool night air to flood in. And for the first time in a long while, I felt a deep sense of peace. The kind of peace that comes when you finally realize you owe no one anything. It's moments like these that remind me to invite you, our listeners, to share your thoughts. If you feel compelled by this raw journey, please consider subscribing. And don't forget to like and comment on the video. But let's get back to the story. As I merged onto the main road, more texts began to fly in. "Hey, are you seriously ignoring me? You can't just leave like that." Her mother pleaded, "Come back and talk like an adult." Her father shouted, "Coward!" And her sister chimed in with, "Real mature, running away like a kid." I smirked. They truly believed they still held sway over me, that their words had the power to control my every move. Another message arrived, as if orchestrated to tug at some hidden chord inside me. "I'm sorry, okay? Just answer me." The tone had shifted from anger to guilt, from insults to feigned regret. It was a psychological dance, a game in which she had long played masterfully. Push, pull, break me down, then lure me back. But I wasn't playing anymore. My phone vibrated again and yet again against the seat until it nearly slid off. Her name appeared on the screen, along with a new text. "Please just talk to me. I don't want to lose you like this. We can fix this." Fix what exactly? The betrayal that had cost us years of trust? The family who had watched, arms crossed, as she surrendered to someone she believed was a real man? With each barb from her family, with every plea from her, I realized that this was not about repairing what was broken. It was about acknowledging how thoroughly she'd upended everything. I hesitated, staring once more at the screen, not because I was willing to reply, but because a part of me was curious to see how far she'd go next with her excuses. What other justifications would she invent for obliterating all that we had built? The light ahead flickered to green, and I pressed my foot down on the gas, allowing the open road to stretch out before me. Another vibration, another desperate text. "You can't just leave me like that. I need you." And yet there it was. Not the moment of decision from the night before, not the moment when she stood silently with her family condemning me, but now confronted by the consequences of her own choices, she was pleading. I took a deep, deliberate breath, my grip tightening on the steering wheel as something within me solidified into unyielding resolve. I hovered my finger over the screen, and without a second thought, I tapped the option to block every single one of them before stowing my phone in the glove compartment. Then I drove on, not daring to glance back. In the days that followed, the silence was almost deafening. No new calls, no texts, nothing. That fleeting peace, however, was only temporary. Mutual friends, people from long ago, suddenly reached out, urging me to reconsider, to talk to her. "Hey man, I heard what happened. Maybe you should hear her out," they said, as if our shared past still mattered. At first I ignored it all, but soon enough the call started. Kevin, a college buddy I wasn't particularly close to, rang first. "Harold, how are you holding up?" he asked with a tone that mixed concern with moral judgment. Leaning back on my couch, I muttered, "Why should I care?" Kevin sighed, attempting to sound wiser than the situation warranted. "It isn't like that, dude. Maybe you should talk to her. She's a mess right now." I laughed, a bitter, hollow laugh. To Kevin, I said, "She made her choice, a choice that spat on everything I ever gave her." There was a long pause, filled with the quiet struggle for words, before he finally suggested softly, "Maybe you should consider forgiving her." I paused, repeating his question in my mind. If your girlfriend had betrayed you, let her family tear you apart, and then stood there like you never mattered, Would you forgive her so easily? That was exactly the point, and I ended the call without another word. Then came another call from Jake, with the same refrain in a different tone. Then Mason, a friend pretending neutrality, each call overlapping like shifts in a never-ending argument. She had believed she could trade me away for someone more exciting, more dominant. Whatever fantasy had convinced her she needed more. Yet the man she found wasn't willing to shoulder responsibilities, pay the bills, or be anything more than a fleeting thrill. He was not a husband, merely a temporary escape from reality. As I drove each day, news trickled in. A former coworker mentioning that she was spiraling, unable to keep up now that the stability I once provided was gone. "She's been a wreck," he confided in a hushed tone at a coffee shop, glancing around as if sharing a secret. I only smiled, taking a sip of my coffee, savoring the irony of it all. What did she expect? That some guy who'd been willing to take her away from me would suddenly assume the mantle of responsibility? The coworker shrugged, admitting that yes, she had hoped he'd step up. But of course, he never did. In time, with every update, from mutual friends, acquaintances, and even those who secretly celebrated my departure, the truth became unmistakably clear. Her family, once so eager to condemn me and bolster her narrative, began to withdraw their support as life's burdens caught up with her. Without my steady presence, the bills piled up, and the security she'd taken for granted evaporated. I wasn't checking in out of concern. I was simply observing from afar, hearing updates from old friends who couldn't resist sharing the unfolding consequences of her choices. One evening, Mike, an old college buddy who'd always seen through the charade, called me out of the blue. "Man, you're never going to believe who showed up at Jen's party last night," he said, half laughing. I already knew the answer. "Drunk? Crying?" I asked without looking up from my drink. Mike exhaled. "Both." She cornered Lauren, went on about how she'd made a mistake and didn't appreciate what she had until it was gone. It was like watching a terrible rom-com in real life. "And the other guy?" I inquired, more amused than concerned. Mike chuckled. "Oh, he vanished within a month after you left. Shocker, huh?" I took another sip, shaking my head. "Sounds exhausting," Mike confirmed. "She kept saying you wouldn't even talk to her, that you just disappeared like she never mattered." "Well," I replied dryly, "she wanted a real man to handle things, right? Guess she got exactly that." Mike let out a low whistle. I pressed on. I wasn't going to return. Not now, not ever. There was no dramatic comeback, no desperate midnight phone call or teary revelation to make me reconsider. I had chosen my path, a path of reclaiming control of my life, severing the toxic ties that had once bound me. With every new message and every whispered update from those who claimed to care, my resolve only deepened. I had let go for a reason, and I refused to be entangled in the fallout of a betrayal that was never truly mine. While some might have hoped for an explosive ending, a passionate confrontation, or a teary reconciliation, I left no room for further drama. My former life with her was a collection of compromises and silent sacrifices. I had given more than I had ever received, shouldered countless responsibilities, and endured the daily dismissal of my worth until I finally realized I was being undervalued. In walking away, I sent a clear message. I would no longer be burdened by the consequences of her choices. Later, I met an old friend at the gym, Alex, someone who'd known both of us without ever picking sides. As we rested by the treadmills, he asked, "Do you ever regret it?" I sipped water, considering his words, then replied simply, "Regret what? Leaving? Cutting her off?" I knew I had to walk away. Alex studied me for a moment, as if searching for a trace of hesitation, but found none. "Damn," he muttered, shaking his head. "Sometimes I wish you had left sooner." "Maybe," I admitted softly. "But sometimes the best way to heal is to close the door for good, not leave it slightly ajar." He whistled lowly. "That's cold, man." "No," I corrected quietly. "That's survival." There was no dramatic return, no desperate confession that would pull me back. As time passed, while I built something new, something stable and free, I witnessed her struggle amid the wreckage of her own making. The absence of my support became a harsh reminder of the secure life she'd taken for granted. And though she tried to rebuild, the scars of her choices remained. both visible and hidden. In the end, my departure wasn't defeat or surrender. It was a final declaration. I walked away from something toxic and unsustainable, never once looking back. The man who vanished wasn't running away. He was moving forward. And as I continued on my path, leaving behind the echoes of a past I no longer claimed, one message resonated clearly. When you lose sight of what truly matters, the price is inevitable, and no amount of insincere apologies can undo that truth. The divorce process turned out to be surprisingly clinical and uncomplicated. Just another cold legal formality that stripped away the illusions of what we once had. We hadn't been together long enough for her to drain me financially. With minimal assets and no real marital property at stake, I had no reason to fight over scraps. I signed the papers without hesitation. She hesitated, not out of remorse or a desire to fix things, but because she was beginning to realize she'd overplayed her hand. I wasn't desperate enough to cling to the wreckage, so I was done, and she despised that. On the day of the final hearing, I walked into the courthouse with my head held high and a focused mind. There she was, already seated with her parents, her mother looking utterly exhausted by the ordeal, and her father seething with anger. When the clerk called our case, we stepped forward. The judge barely glanced up as she skimmed through the files. "Mr. Reynolds, do you agree to these terms?" she asked. "Yes, Your Honor," I replied. "And Mrs. Reynolds?" After a brief pause, she nodded reluctantly. "Yes, Your Honor." With a stamp on the documents, the judge declared our marriage legally dissolved. 1 year of alimony was ordered as agreed, and with that, it was over, at least on paper. But as soon as we stepped into the hallway, her father lunged forward, his face contorted with rage. "You think you can just walk away?" he growled. I barely spared him a glance. "You ruined her life," he spat, his voice rising. "You abandoned your wife." I cut him off calmly. "She stopped being my wife the moment she chose another man." His fist came swinging, a wild, uncoordinated burst of raw emotion. I saw it coming and sidestepped, letting his blow cut through empty space. The momentum betrayed him, and before he could recover, I countered with a single decisive punch to his jaw. He collapsed, out cold, and the hallway fell deathly silent. I adjusted my suit with a calm resolve, then turned to face my ex-wife. Frozen in disbelief, she opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. I met her wide eyes steadily and said with quiet finality, "That is how a real man does business." Dear listeners, if this journey through heartbreak, betrayal, and self-reclamation resonated with you in any way, please take a moment to subscribe, drop a like, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your support means everything as we continue to explore real, raw stories like this. Every moment led me here. The final decision to walk away, to reclaim what was mine, and to let the past dissolve into nothingness. I realized that when you lose track of what truly matters, respect, mutual effort, trust, the only outcome is devastation that no apology can mend. Every plea, every false promise that followed became mere echoes of a life that had already been lost. My divorce was not a battle, but an inevitable separation from a toxic tie, a necessary escape to rebuild everything that mattered. When the judge pronounced our marriage dissolved, I felt a weight lifted from my shoulders. I watched as her parents' expressions shifted from anger to disbelief. And when news of the finality spread, her father's rage boiled over once again in the hallway. A confrontation that ended with a swift act of self-defense. A single punch that signaled the end of any possibility for further manipulation. I walked away knowing that sometimes true strength lies in letting go, forging a new path free from the chains of betrayal, and moving forward without regret. That night, stepping into the unknown, I left behind not only my former life, but the echoes of a past that no longer defined me. I had chosen freedom, and in that choice, I discovered that a real man is not measured by his ability to endure endless torment, but by the courage to walk away and build a future on his own terms. Remember, if you find stories like this empowering and thought-provoking, do subscribe, like, and share your opinions with us. After all, every step forward is a reminder that when you lose sight of what really matters, the consequences are inevitable. And sometimes the only way to truly live is to let go. And so, as I drove into that uncertain night, the sound of my car merging with the open road, I knew one thing for certain. I had reclaimed control over my destiny. The pain, the betrayal, and the shattered illusions were now behind me. And with every mile I drove, I felt stronger, unburdened by a past that no longer held any power over me. That, my friends, is the enduring truth. When you decide to move forward, you leave behind a legacy of scars and regrets, and instead embrace the promise of tomorrow.